Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pop Culture. Tyson Popplestone here. Hope you're all doing really well. Hope your week's treating you well. I'm excited to introduce to you today a bloke by the name of Mark Dobson. I met this guy back in 2005 when I was getting ready for a year 12, I think it was the start of the year preparation course, and they said that they were having a motivational speaker. I was always apprehensive about these guys because it's all good and well to go in and motivate someone for 10 minutes and then say, hey, see you next year. But this guy was different. He came in and I wouldn't call him a motivational speaker at all. He's a performance coach. This guy not only inspires you, but he equips you with practical tools to be able to take steps towards whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And we've seen him work with the likes of Grant Hackett, one of the greatest swimmers the world's ever seen, 1,500-meter swimmer. He's worked with businessmen and memory athletes, and he's worked with comedians. He's worked with a whole range of people. And I wanted to pick his brain about what it is that, what are some of the common traits of a successful person. More than that, we talk about creative process. We talk about parenting. He's got a couple of kids around the same age as mine. It was a really good, honest conversation. It's one of the things I love about Dobbo is you never have to guess what he's thinking. He'll always tell you, and it's a trait I respect. So, hey, I hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, hey, chuck us a little review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you listen to them. It'd be greatly appreciated. But for now, enjoy this conversation with myself and performance coach Mark Dobson. Awesome, man. Well, it was good to see you again. I was just about to say to you before I hit record that I feel as though it was 17 years ago that I first met you, which was at the high school camp, which for anyone who's heard any of my podcast interviews, especially with you, we'd already know. But I was saying I pre-recorded a little introduction to this one because I knew roughly what I wanted to talk about with you. And one of the things I said was when you came to the high school for the first time, I'd seen some of the so-called motivational speakers in the past, and we'd had a couple of attempts at people coming into the school. So even though I was semi-open to the idea, I was also semi-cautious because it seems to be an industry with a lot of wankers in there if you're not careful.
Yeah,
And I'm delighted to say that you completely broke the stereotype that I had in my mind that day. And it's funny. It's funny now, 17 years later, sitting here with you on a podcast because the impact you made that day was so big. So it's I tell you, it's weird when you start layering up a couple of decades worth of that work. You've been in the scene now for a very long time. I'm guessing not so much in the high school scene now anymore, though.
No, not at all. But what is interesting is during that period when I was working in schools, I was so dedicated. Like I was so passionate, and I just wanted to help. What never crossed my mind is what might happen 15 or 20 years later. And I have people like you reaching out and other people writing me letters and bumping into me in the street. Just the other day, actually, my mate, he's got a Tesla and it had broken. And so he said, look, can we have lunch while I wait for my car to get fixed? So I go see him, and then he's getting all worked up because Tesla's messing him around. And my thing's going, and he's a few pings here, and Tesla's messing him around. But anyway, so he says, I'm gonna have to say to these guys, it's ridiculous. So we go in and we walk in the door to pick up the car, and this guy comes out and he looks a bit familiar and he's just staring at me. And out of the blue, he just says, Dobbo. Oh my God, you're Dobbo. And so he goes, oh my God, I was on your program when I was a kid. And now Ryan just rolls his eyes thinking, well, I can't have a go at this guy now. Like, and this stuff still happens all the time. It's amazing.
Man, it's funny. It's no surprise to me because I remember just the relief on every year 12 back in 2005 when they realized you just weren't a wanker. You came in, you had some practical tools. You weren't going to take bullshit. They were either do the course seriously or do the program seriously, or, don't bother. It's no sweat off your back to, to have one person less who's not interested in the scene. One thing I've never spoken to you about, one thing I'm curious to find out, because you're just saying that you're just motivated and inspired and just keen to help as many young people as you could back in those days, it's interesting to speak to people like you and just find out what it was that got them into a scene like this. Because for me, I sort of followed your footsteps for a couple of years, and I can talk about why I sort of moved away a little bit if you're interested. But one of the things that I found personally was it was a message that I probably needed to hear more than anyone that I spoke to. Like the things that I was constantly speaking about in schools were just a constant reminder to me. And I think I was probably born and raised in an environment where, I probably went towards a default of anxiety just too quickly in unnecessary moments when I was younger. And I think as a result, I kind of needed these tools just to, try and get the most out of myself. And as a keen distance runner, I was really curious to find out about the mental advantages to some of the things that, the mental teachings would offer. But I never really heard about your introduction to it. Like, what was the fuel to get you in a scene like this?
Well, I lived in a the street I lived in. Next door there was a convent. I lived next door to a bunch of nuns, and next door to that there was a church, and next door to that was the primary school. And we were heavily involved in the church. Mum and Dad were always running the church fetes and similar, and everybody kind of knew the school, the church, the convent, and the Dobson house because we were so involved. And as time went on, they started a youth club, and I attended the youth club, and eventually someone said, "Look, have you thought about running it?" And I was probably only about 14 or 15. And I just, oh God, I look back, I was probably so bloody awkward. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did. I just started to run it. Somebody just said, he seems to be okay, but I wasn't a cool kid at all. But that youth club grew from having maybe 15 or 20, 30 kids to nearly 200. And I just understood how to have people be engaged and to feel valued. And then off the back of that, I was awarded an award, the Rotary Youth Leadership Award called RYLA. And on that, they basically, they just support young people who are doing things in the community. And I got there and I heard a guy speaking, and I thought, it just clicked. I was like, I think I could do that. And then also asked a lot of questions, and they didn't have good answers for me. So 5-day camp of all leadership strategies, and they just didn't have a good strategy. They just couldn't help me. I said, look, I've got 200 kids coming on Friday night. If a kid runs away with the ball in the middle of the game, what am I meant to do? Like, what do I do? And they didn't have a good answer. And so I was still stuck. And they said, well, if you work it out, you can come back and talk next year. So I did come back and talk. And the answer is have a second ball ready to go. And that's the answer. And then I thought the youth club was my thing. I think for a lot of us, we're searching for our medium. Where is it that I can be me? And the youth club was my best guess. And I was terrible at sport, and I could public speak. I remember having a debating class. Oh yeah, there was English class, and the second half of the year was always the debating or public speaking section. And I always went from a D to an A in the second half of the year. And I remember getting up the front one time and just saying to all these kids, like, you haven't even read the book. Like, why are we even not talking about this? And everybody just got called out. And I didn't know. And everyone started to go, God, Dobby, you know what you're doing up the front? And I had no idea I did. But, and then there was a time I made a conscious decision to do it. But it was brutal, mate. Like it was brutal having the career I have now. It was so difficult. It didn't exist. It wasn't the career guide. I remember one night, I'm not sure if I mentioned this on your other show, but I remember just desperately trying to find work, and mum and dad saying, Mark, you're going to have to get a job or something. It doesn't work. And I remember just launching a chair across the backyard in tears, saying it shouldn't be this hard. And it went for about 6 years of less than $1 would have earned for sure. It was just brutal. And because I was trying to invent something that didn't exist. It exists now, well and truly. But yeah, like I can go into more of that, but and then you just got to start finding works and be valuable. And if you do a good job up the front, then usually you get a second invite. Usually the word gets out and someone else will call you.
Yeah, it's a good point. I remember, and I would have spoken to you about this before, but I remember it was probably 6 months later after that first camp, you were back at our school in the hall, and I was like, all right, that's good. The Year 12 coordinators know what's going on. They know when they've spotted a winner. It is interesting, man. Like it definitely has gotten a lot busier from what it sounds like it was now, because that was one of the things that I found interesting. Like every man and his dog, maybe it's just my friendship group, is curious about how to run a program in a school. And I've got a couple of friends who have sort of done the same thing, and it's amazing how many options are out there now. Like I did a little bit of casual teaching in schools up until a few years ago, and when I was there, even as a casual teacher, there would constantly be like a health and wellness session that the kids were running, and like dealing with anxiety. And there's just there seems to be hundreds of people attempting to get the ball rolling now in that scene, probably because I guess they know there's an industry there. But what at the start, were you just cold calling and sending emails and just doing your best to say, hey, I've got a good message?
Yeah. I think the reason so many people are doing it is because my computer keeps pinging. And can you hear, is that coming through on you? Or is it just my headphones? Are you getting that?
Yeah, no, I did come through, but it was the first one I'd heard.
on mute. I don't know what's going on. It's bloody Apple. Hang on, let me just. I'll just close a couple of things so that we're set.
Yeah, no
I
dramas.
think a large reason that there's a lot of people in the industry doing this or trying to is I'm not sure if they think there's money there. I think that it's sincerely trying to help. They're getting to an age where they realize that they're looking back on their childhood saying, "Oh, that wasn't helpful. I didn't learn what I needed to learn." And then they want to set up a foundation or run a program. And I think some people truly want to help that age bracket. I don't think everybody's doing it for money, but the challenge there is in the challenge at the moment is you can look a certain way, and then the school for me, corporate audience, the corporate employer has to look at you and try to work out, is that really who you are? And I had a person say to me one time, like, I was talking to them, they hire a lot of people for corporate conferences. And she said, "Oh, I see everybody's videos, but what I'm trying to work out, will you be like that with my people? Or was that just a perfect day?" And so that is really difficult now. And when it started, it was probably even harder. So when I started, printing was expensive. And look how I'm a dinosaur. So what I did is I must have gone through the phone book and typed up about 250 addresses for schools. And then I wrote a letter to the school principal. And rather than just doing it on a printer, I came up with a logo and it had 3 different colors. And that was expensive to print back then. So it cost me about $700. I printed these letters and it said, "Hello, principal. I run these programs, blah, 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 blah." And I remember the whole family, they arrived back from the printer and we were going to fold them and send them out. And then we realized we'd spelt principal wrong.
Oh, no. It's a
And
shit of
everybody
a
had
word
checked.
as well.
Yeah. So we started again. I think, I don't know where the money came from. I don't know what we did. Maybe we just printed the letters again. I don't know what we did, but so we sent them out and I think 4 people called. And I think some people called me and said, "We just really still don't understand what you do." And that was a bit embarrassing. And then I think 2 hired me and that was pretty much the strike rate for a long time. And I made a lot of mistakes, but my intent was always really sincere, and I came with a lot of energy, and generally, yeah. Is that a good enough answer?
That's a good answer. I was just thinking about how you were saying that people would see the videos and they'd go, "Okay, well, maybe that was just you at your best." It's the same in the comedy scene. I don't know if you remember. I think I might have told you a couple of 12 months ago when we last spoke that my new love is a stand-up, or 4 years into my new love is a stand-up comedy scene. And one of the things you find out quickly when you want to get a gig at a better room is you'll contact the room runner and they'll go, "All right, have you got some clips?" And you go, "Well, yeah, I do, but do you want to see the clips of me bombing?" Which happened,
Yeah.
if not as regularly as they used to, but I got plenty of those. Or you just want to see me where things just work to a T. And they always mean just show me where things work to a T. And I send those through and I'm like, just in the back of my mind, I'm like, you and I both know there's no guarantee this is going to happen. But
Yeah.
here's me at my best. And if you're happy to attempt, or if you're happy for, for me to come and try and do this, I'll try and do it again. But it always comes with that asterisk of, hey, there's so many variables as well. The stand-up comedy scene I find different to just presenting in schools. And so I don't know what you find about the corporate scene, but I always found that people are generally fairly respectful, even if they don't necessarily enjoy what it is that you're talking about. They'll sit back and they'll go, "Oh, that's nice." But what I kind of like about the stand-up scene as well, and I had the same experience as the corporate in the church. Church was worse. I was a youth pastor for a while, and I'd go in there, and if the congregation hated what you were talking about, well, at church, you can't be an asshole about it. You have to just sit there and smile. But in the comedy scene, you might not even be trying to be an asshole. But if your jokes aren't funny and people aren't laughing, it's pretty obvious pretty quickly to everyone in the room that you're bombing.
Mm. I did I did do comedy for a while. I think you knew that, didn't you?
No, I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah, I did comedy for a while, and I'm better at what I do now. But because I always could when I go do a keynote and it's funny that we talk about motivation. I just don't see myself in that category, but I
I
appreciate you
don't
saying.
either, for what it's
No,
worth. Just
no,
as
I know.
a
The
clarification, I
audience
don't see
does
you in
because
that.
you
But
use the
yeah,
bloody language, right? Thanks.
yeah,
And
my bad.
but when I'm presenting, I'm funny, but I'm not. Oh, that sounds so egotistical, but I'm just having a bloody good time. And if I see something that's funny, I just can't help but say it, right? And so it's highly engaging. And then I'd always thought about doing comedy, And so I did it, and I did my first gig was in New York City, because somebody had access to, I can get you a gig in New York, and it wasn't a good gig. I didn't do well. But, and then the second one was at a, oh man, it was at a what do you call it? A talent show in Dandenong, and I got up and I bombed like, oh, it was brutal. One of my mates drove me down there, and he knew I'd bombed. It was so bad. I won't go into the details, but I bombed. I remember getting in the car driving home and swearing that I would never, ever, ever have that happen to me again in my life. Like, it was just so painful. And but as I did comedy, it used to be I think it's still on, the Raw Comedy Festival, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
interesting because I did that, and Dave Hughes came up to me afterwards, and he said, he's gone, man, you got a really interesting style. He said, just keep doing that. And it was that very candid, just calling the audience out, going, like, for example, if someone's heckling me from the audience, I'd just be like, mate, you haven't got the balls to get up the front, but you're happy to sit there all pissed up and have a crack. And then, yeah, I remember saying, like that, I tend to just call it as it is. And so then I actually had a guy who did comedy, and he gave me tickets to his show, and he said, can you come and watch and give me some feedback? And so I did. I went and watched him, and I've got a good eye for talent, and I can usually pick what the magic ingredient is that would make a change. And I said, could you come and watch one of my presentations and tell me, whether you think it'll transfer into a comedy stage? And he got the end of it. He goes, are you kidding? Don't do comedy. He's like, you're funny as hell. And you went for 2 hours, and you were killing them, and you got paid a shitload. Why on earth do you want to go and do 5 minutes in front of Trump? Like, and I had this really good sobering moment where I'm like, oh my, the grass isn't greener.
Nah.
You've actually won. You're doing it. You just don't know you've done it.
It's a good point. That's one thing I always say to people is, like, if you want to do comedy, don't get involved in it for the money, because there's a couple of people who make really, really good money, but I live an hour and a half away from most of the comedy venues. So for me, all it's doing is costing me plenty of petrol money, but it's like, I'm a better bloke, I think, when I do it. That's interesting though, man. I can imagine you being that kind of bloke who just call bullshit from the front of the room. I reckon hecklers would have been your best friend in that sense. And it is interesting. Like, I like that balance that you spoke about with the more keynote presentations, because I reckon a lot of the time, and I've experienced this through keynotes, I've experienced this in the church world, I've experienced it, unfortunately, the comedy world. But the keynote world is, from so many people who seem to be new to it, interested in the information. And when you start making it engaging in the sense that it's a little bit funny as well, it seems to be like a little bit of sugar on top, the cherry on top. So it is and the paychecks, as we've established, are far more appealing than what they are in the comedy world. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's really when people are buying a keynote, they're really buying a story. That's what fundamentally happens. And they want to, you climbed Everest and you lost a leg, or you got lost at sea for 7 days, and a shark rescued you. They're looking for something. They go, oh wow, I want to hear that story. And one of the challenges for me is I don't really have a story like that. If I lost a leg, sometimes I'd probably have a bigger profile, although I don't want to be a bigger profile. I actually really like kind of being anonymous. I know I've got a small profile, and that's fine, which means it's harder to get in. So it means my agent always has to sort of sell me and say, listen, you got to try this guy, and they go, oh, well, there's this other person that does this. And and they often hire the other person first, and then the following year they get me. And I did have to change my story. So if people go to my website, it's Dobbo, my nickname Dobbo, dobbo.com.au. There's a video there, and they're both still live, but there's a video, like a show reel, like you said, with the best bits of you. Well, there's two. There's one which I had almost just over a year ago, and it didn't convert for work at all. And the feedback was, you just come across very serious. And my agent's like, he's not. He's going to take the piss. Like, you're not going to know what's going to happen next. So we had to update that video, and there's a second video there. And we're always trying to flush out the story. Now, because I've been doing this for so long and I've advised so many elite talents, we made that the story, that there's over 100 elite talents that I advise. But that's really the game in the corporate sector. That it's the story. And most people have got a 45-minute, very plastic, pre-rehearsed, formulaic slideshow with and then at the end they finish it and they go, any questions? And then they become themselves at the end. So when I get up and on myself from the start, or at least I try to be as sincere as I can be, that's usually pretty refreshing, and it's a bit out of the box. But there's also a risk for the organizer because I'm not famous and the story's not as sexy. But once I'm usually in for a long time. Like I
Yeah.
continue to work with the company usually.
Yeah. What does that preparation phase look like for you? Because it is interesting. I noticed that as well. When you get to a Q&A, a lot of people relax a little more. And I also know, like the corporate scene, you might have a particular number of keynotes or presentations that you've got pre-prepared. But that writing process is one that I'm fascinated by, especially in the scene that I'm in now. Like when you're coming up with a particular new keynote or a particular new session, have you got little strategies that you use to structure it? Like there's so many interesting ways that people write and prepare that it never ceases to amaze me. Just
Um,
how very how many different
yeah,
variables there are.
yeah. So I'm not very good at writing things in advance. I need to see the audience's face. I need to see them change. So I listened to one of your podcasts the other day, and I got a lot out. I listened to the one about Bert, and I got so
He's a
much out of it.
gun, man.
Oh
Yeah,
man, my heart was so grateful because I feel like the space that he lives in is the space I lived in for a long time, and then I had kids,
yeah,
and they just constantly dragged me out of that space. So it was so good to hear him and just remind a part of myself that I was like, oh, Mark, that's where you live. What are you doing? Like, how did you lose your way so much? It's not every day, but you need to make more of an effort once you got kids because it's a constantly as a parent you have to be so selfless. Then I also listened to one of the other ones you did on feedback from social media feedback or something, and it was bloody. I was laughing out loud. I couldn't believe how funny you were. And in the second half of it, I could see you kind of riffing, almost trying content. And I thought it was sensational. I find I can't ever write like that, but I know there's other people that are very good at writing like that, and then they test them. I tend to discover things when somebody asks me a question. I then can quickly bring up the answer, but I wouldn't have known it had I sat down at a computer to try to write it. So when I'm going up the front, no two presentations are the same, but there are common frameworks or stories that I piece together. So if I am preparing, I'll typically jot down either what drawing I'm going to put on the board because I can just talk to it. So it's a picture of a triangle with an eagle at the top that's got a story, and I'll often jot down what image and what's the outcome. Like what am I trying to teach them, and then what story I would use, and I would tweak the stories. So depending on what audience, if I've got salespeople, it might be a different story to leaders, might be a different story to a couple of thousand nurses or whatever the audience is. So I'm very light on my notes. But one of the things that I know is critical, and I think it's really critical for comedy, and I'm not sure comedians focus here enough. Comedy is primarily about observation, but they cannot see, they're trying to work you out first. And unless you've got rapport with the audience, they don't get your humor. So when I get up the front, I know they're trying to work out four things. They're trying to work out, one, do they like me? So I have to tick that box. Two, they're trying to work out, do I know anything? Then they're trying to work out, is it actually applicable or useful to them? And the last one is, do they trust me enough to tell me their actual problem? So that's when I'm designing it, I'm trying to work through those as quickly as possible. Now, I can often have all those boxes ticked in just a couple of minutes. Not always, but generally I can. And that really disarms people because they're like, holy shit, this is game on. This guy's not fucking around. We're doing this, and it's game on. And I think for most, I think that's any presenter needs to put their time into the rapport with the audience. The killer is when someone starts, first, a little bit about me, or when I was asked to do this presentation, no one gives a fuck about you. Like they just don't give a shit. It has to be about them.
Mm. Yeah,
So
it's interesting.
that's roughly how I think it through.
Yeah, what's the process for building rapport? I guess it changes from audience to audience, but if you got little things that once you recognize in an audience, you've got them, or is there something that you do, or a number of things that you do?
Um, what you're trying to do is you're trying to have the audience say yes in their head at least 3 times. So when I say to people, you're trying to work out if you like me, They just said yes. And then you're trying to work out if I know anything. They're like, yeah. And then trying to work out if it's useful for you. Yeah. And again, you're trying to work out if you trust me enough to tell me. They're like, yeah, I just got 4. I'm done. I'm in.
Yeah.
So, great comedians are like, I can't remember who it was years ago, but there was a comedy show and everybody had to walk past this big green plant. And eventually one of the comedians just like said, what the fuck is with the plant? Who put that there? As soon as he came out the front, and everyone's pissed themselves because everybody's looking at this damn plant going, what do they put it there for? But the comedians were just walking past it, not commenting. But the whole room was thinking about it. So you just got to take something that everybody's thinking about. So if you get in a bar and it's a sticky floor, you're like, hey, sticky floor, huh?
Yeah.
And that's it. And they're like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
That is interesting. It's amazing how many bombs start with. Well, I guess it's the constant, and you'd know this from the couple of shows that you've done, but just to stick to the comedy scene, it's amazing how many variables go into a night being good. Like I always say that I try and explain to my wife when I get home from a gig, and she'll go, "How'd you go?" And I go, "Well, I mean, like some nights it's really easy. Some nights you're like, I killed. Like I had an amazing night. It was like one of the best. Then other nights you're like, there's a weird vibe in the room. There was something off. Like the energy was low. There was the way that it was arranged was strange.
Yep.
I was being heckled by people's cutlery because they were trying to eat their meal. They had no idea that comedy was taking place there.
Yep.
It's just I always say that if you walked into a room where a bar fight had just taken place, like it's going to be hard to go in there and be funny because the atmosphere is just not up for laughing. And that's one thing I noticed. Like in a room like that, I find the rapport building the hardest part because it's like you're getting up there and you address the the fact that half the people in the room don't really want to be there. They didn't realize that open mic comedy was about to start. And then here you are just interrupting their meal as they're trying to have fun with their family.
Yeah, that's true. And then it comes down to how quickly you can acknowledge or work out where they're at and like what's there. If they're sitting there thinking, hang on, I just came out for dinner with my friends. I didn't expect there to be comedy on. And if that's what they're thinking, and if you can say that, then they're like, yeah, mate, that's right. And you're engaged, you're connected. So what I'm also trying to work out, because I still have those, and I guess as I've become more experienced, I can sort of tell a client what I'm not prepared to do. So for example, I don't ever MC, and I don't do after dinners, because after dinner they're really wanting it to be funny, and I am funny, but it's a different kind of thing. It's like I've seen people who just kill it after dinner. I'm like, oh, that's not me. I'm much better in a workshop style. I've got a couple of hours I can really engage with people. I'm always trying to work out, okay, did I bomb because it was my fault, or it was basically a messed up situation where it was not fertile soil? And I see a lot of speakers through the years blame the audience, and I look at it and no, mate, you were actually just crap. It wasn't the audience. And it's really important to try to work to hold a very accurate mirror up to yourself to try to work it out. One of the things that I notice I do, and I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, so I'm being as honest as I can, so I hope it doesn't come across like arrogant, but if someone asks me the question, I'm like, this is my answer, is that when I get up the front, I'm going to win. I've made that decision. It's not hope. There's not 1 ounce of hope in me. So if I get grief from the floor, they will lose. And not as in I'm better than you, but I'm going to lead you to a better place no matter what. Like, we're going to laugh. And I did a function for a bunch of sales reps about 4 years ago, and I had multiple briefing calls with the client. And then just as I'm about to go on stage, the guy said to me, oh, by the way, just so you know, no one's ever finished their presentation to these guys before. So if you don't finish it, it's okay. And I looked at him and said, you don't think you could have mentioned that a bit earlier? Seriously. So then I get up there and I wouldn't even had the first few words out of my mouth, and they were after me, and they were huge, physically big guys, huge egos. And they just went after me and started throwing questions at me. And they were like, so what do you know about our business? What have they told you? What kind of brief? Like, do you want to know anything about this industry? And really the game in that situation is who reacts to who. So power is who reacts to who. So when they're throwing a question at me, I've got to respond. Well, then they control it. So I can't afford to answer those questions. So usually I just yawn. I'm like, as if I'm like, and I just wait. And I've also got to make sure that when I do speak, it's highly valuable right away. And that's really, the more you understand your audience, the more you can say something that's highly valuable. So if it's a comedy thing, it might be like, hey, it takes a long time to get a drink, or, oh, this gig's got a wanker in the front row too. And
Yeah,
know,
sure.
like the wanker in the front row is the same as the plant that everybody's trying to walk past. Everybody's thinking it. You step out, they go, I hope he doesn't get hammered by the guy in the front. Well, if I got up front, then I would do this. If I got the front and someone's a dickhead, I would just go after him before. I'll be the first thing I say. I go, "Hey, dickhead, how are we doing today? You want to play?" I'm like, "Game on, let's go."
That's
And then
good.
he'll go to open
Yeah.
his mouth, and I'll be like, "Sorry, mate, I'm just getting a drink. I'll be with you in a second." I was like, "That's not very
Yeah.
interesting. How long does it take for a comeback?" And I would just fucking destroy him, but I wouldn't be destroying him because I want to make him small. It'd be fun, but I'll go, "Mate, if you want to play, I've done this 10,000 times."
Yeah.
But back to that point, like, there's no hope in me. It's going to happen, but that's largely because I've got the skill so I can execute it. I know where to put the effort. I might lose my composure in the process, but the audience won't know. But I think that's the case with a lot of people that are very good at something. That sounds so egotistical. It's certainly not my intent, but when someone's good at something, they just go, "I'm just going to do it." It's like, I'm going to eat dinner. I'm going to drive to the petrol station. It's just, there's not, I hope I get to the petrol station. I'm just doing it because I know how. And I think that what everyone's trying to do with their skill is get to a point where they just know how to execute.
Man, it doesn't sound arrogant to me at all. It makes so much sense. As a bloke who spent, a fair bit of time on stage myself, I know you need to have that attitude, because it's also like the flip side of that. I try and do a little review. I'll set a couple of goals, or at least one goal, before I get on stage. Like a lot of the time I lean on self-deprecation in the comedy world. I'll get up there and I find it funny sometimes, but there's a line between, all right, he's self-deprecating, that's a funny observation, and then, oh, far out, this guy hates himself. Like,
Yeah.
and the number of times better comedians than me have got down there like, oh, just limit the self-deprecation to 1 in a 5-minute set because it's too much. And you can feel it sometimes. Where was I going with that? That self-deprecation. Oh, yeah. But the flip side of that is when you get up on stage with the attitude that, no, I'm going to win. Like, it's just I like that idea, because then regardless of what comes up in the environment in that room on that night, it's like, okay, it might be surprising in the sense that you weren't anticipating it, but your mindset's already there as like, all right, well, this is just who I am. It's what I'm here to deal with. I've already figured that out. Just
That's
saves
it.
you that one extra step.
What you said then is right. It's who I am. So if you think about a lawyer, they study law, then they practice law, and then they're a lawyer. So like when I'm up the front, I'm the real deal. So I'm not in a practice mode anymore. And it's nice in the later half of life to have that. And it doesn't mean that I will win every time. I tend to have a much better success rate now. But what I've got is still a reverence for the task every time. I might have won in front of 10,000 audiences, but this one's new. And I really respect that. And I still do the work every time. The other thing is that when I say win, some people hear that means that the audience loses, and it's not actually what it means. It means that I'm going to win on my objective to get all of you to a place that makes you happier. So even when I go in as a presenter and I'm helping someone work out how to hit targets, close deals, lead their people, scale their business, I'm looking for them to be happier. It's just that business is the medium. It's just like athletes. Sport was the medium about how we work out how we find our happiness. That's still my agenda, and I'm very open about that. I'll say to audiences, just say they sell pharmaceutical products or like I don't know, alcohol or something. I go, guys, I couldn't give a shit about what you sell. I just don't give a shit. I'll tell them outright, and they'll laugh. And I go, if that's what's important to you, I'm happy to help you do it. So I'm not being disrespectful, but when I came here, it's not because I came here and goes, oh my God, let's sell some product. But I do come here thinking, I wonder how I can help these people enjoy whatever they're doing, and they'll be nicer to their kids and their families. It just seems like a good thing to do. It's just we have to get paid in the process somehow.
Yeah. So that's your guiding principle, is that finding happiness is essentially what you're trying to cultivate, whether you work with an athlete, a corporate, just someone else in that scene.
Yeah, it is. Because I think we're all happy when we deliver on what we're capable of. And it feels good. I feel good when they're happy. I feel good that I made them happy. Like there's an example I often use where if I want to be rich, if I pick up 50 cents, I'm not going to be rich. But if I give a kid 50 cents, I feel rich because it lights them up. So I win too when the audience wins. We all win.
Yeah, it's such a good point, man. I heard Mike Tyson quote something around that the other day. He was speaking about one thing you learnt, that back in the day, he thought winning made him happy. And he goes, yeah, it makes you happy for a moment, but giving to him is what sort of brings fuel to his fire, which I thought was interesting. And you mentioned the latter part of life. Like, I think he might be he must be early 50s, mid 50s now. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to see a bloke like Iron Mike soften up a little bit and start to make
Yeah.
observations
Mm.
like that. But Dobbo, one thing you said, which I thought was interesting, probably because I relate so much to it right now, is just referring to your kids.
Yeah, kids, 2 children. Yep.
You got
Ollie
two.
and
So
Jack.
you got an Ollie, do you?
Holly.
Ollie, Matt, Holly.
Holly, Holly is 3 and Jack's 15, 16 months. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, we've got a 2-year-old and we've got another one due next week. So when you said you were coming on the podcast, I was like, please be available this week because I might have dad duties calling real. But it's amazing. Like you spoke about it beautifully before. You mentioned it beautifully when you were saying that, like that Bert Gershaw interview. That's where you live. That mindset, that attitude, that appreciation and gratitude for life is where you live. And I feel a lot of the time, or I think that's where I live as well. But and I'm pretty sure my wife would back me up with this. The last couple of years, it's amazing how quickly a little kid can take you away from not your core values in a bad way, but amazing how much just that selflessness that's required to try and keep a kid alive and raise them well turns your attention away from you and the things that sort of help you flourish. I often find that the last couple of years, it's like, all right, well, am I a prick or am I just not handling the stresses of this new role very well? And I think it's a combination of both of those things.
Yeah.
So and it's become a really interesting conversation to me because no one warned me about this. When you have kids, they go, yeah, you'll be busy, but no one said that. Yeah, but you'll have 7 minutes for yourself each day. And that's in between, washing up dirty nappies and putting your kid to bed. And it's like, well, what growth happens in that 7 minutes? And I've been trying to navigate this mindset a little bit and, change the way I approach, I guess, self-development, but it's been a bit of a rocky kind of a adventure.
I think it's a really important conversation, and I'm trying to be as open about it as possible. And I don't know if I've spoken in a public forum about it. Being a dad is really hard. It's really, really hard. And like, I love my kids and I'm a very involved dad. And I think that's what is hard. I was at a function recently and a couple of boys came and joined the second half. And I said, we're just at the bar. And I said to the guy, you got kids as well. And, he said, yeah. And he listed the ages. And I said, oh, it's tough. He goes, yeah, it is. It's really hard. It's really hard. And he says, well, hang on. No, wait a second. It's hard for my wife. And I was like, you asshole. Like he was there. Like I was out having a drink with them at the time, but I was leaving in 20 minutes because I want to be home for bedtime. And it's hard putting the kids down. Like, and we got kids that, like, our daughter's 3. She sets the table and clears the table. Right. Like, so she participates, but it's just fundamentally hard. He's like rounding up sheep. And especially if someone's sick, and our son has been, and he's okay, but he's okay, but he has been crooking. And it was quite clear that he was just being a dad at a distance. And I'm like, oh, so that doesn't help me. But and then I had another friend say to me, he goes, oh, you really must miss just going out for dinner with Brona and just spending time together. I said, mate, I miss having a shit on my own.
Yeah, me too.
Banging on the door and like coming in. No, it's brutal. But I think this is a really important conversation. And I'm very lucky that I've got mates that are emotionally literate and happy to talk about this stuff. And I was broken about 2 weeks ago. I was just broken. And I was talking to a good friend of mine, Chad. And I've known Chad since I was 21. And he's an American. We chat once a month, just for 20 minutes. That's all we can fit in, but it works. And I was in a hole. I was like, I just yelled at the kids again, which I hate doing. And I just cracked. And then Jack was screaming. I cannot think when he yells. I just cannot think. When Holly cried, I could think. When Jack cries, I can't think. And also because the kids had been sick, I kept on getting sick. I've been sick for bloody months. And it was interesting because they were all able to, it was good because they didn't give me any advice. They just go, yeah, it's shit. And that's all I actually needed, because if they gave me advice, it would be like, oh, there's a way through it. But they were saying, no, there's no way through it. It's just fundamentally really difficult. And it was interesting because 2 of my mates that are fit and invincible, they said, oh yeah, when I had kids, I was just sick all the time. And I was like, oh, were you? And because I thought something had happened to me that I was going to be just sick forever. I thought, what is this? And especially with the second one, there is a clear study that says, when you have kids, your happiness goes down for 5 years. And I do admit I count down the days until I get to that 5-year mark.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's not that I don't love my kids, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but it is just so difficult and selfless that it's and we got kids that are pretty functional, so it's interesting that you say that. And even I got a bit annoyed the other day when I was listening to your podcast, and you said I spent roughly tried to spend an hour with Charlie, an hour with my wife, and then 3 hours doing something else. And then you said he went for a long walk for a cafe. It's like, how the fuck did he fit that in? Because
It would have been a daycare day. It would have been a daycare day.
it must have been.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you got to tell him the truth too. It's like impossible.
Oh, yeah, Dobbo. No, I don't know what I was going on about there. It had to have been a daycare day because I definitely don't feel like that's my norm. In fact, maybe one of the things that I've been finding hilarious at the moment, me and Jessie, my wife, we laugh at together, is I used to be obsessed with, and I still appreciate it, but I used to love trying to just figure out what's that perfect morning routine. What's a nice morning routine to get up? And I was watching, there's this chick on YouTube, and I do a bit of yoga on there. And the other day it was she was just taking us through a typical day in her life. She must be like 25 or 26. And she woke, so it was a vlog. She woke up and she goes, I like to start my day. I do a little bit of yoga in my bed. I'll open my journal and I'll write down my thoughts for the day, my plans for the day, and what I'm grateful for. So then I like to get up and I'll have a smoothie and a green juice. And then I'll go for a walk. And I'm like, you don't have kids.
No way.
Because my day starts with my kid yelling because he's woken up. He's shat his pants and it's leaked out his nappy. It's coming out his foot. I'm on dad duty that morning in the sense of Jesse's sleeping day. It's just my morning routines have taken a whack. If you look at the start of my day at the moment, you go, oh, okay, this guy's not necessarily that interested in like health and wellness because all he's doing is just cleaning shit up from like, I don't even know how that pot is still out. It's just, there's so many factors that it's interesting that you say that happiness does decline for a certain extent, because you feel bad saying that, because obviously it's the greatest gift I've ever had. I would never, ever substitute I say my kids now, because I got one coming in a week and a half, but I would never substitute that for anything. And yet in saying all of that, it's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've personally faced. And I think it's because I'm trying to be as hands-on as possible as well. I really respect that about you. Like I want to be a real hands-on dad and be sort of a really positive guiding figure in his life. And that requires time. But man, it's interesting that it's people give you like a soft warning. They're like, I said to my dad's mate the other day, I just met him and he goes, oh, what's going on in your world, mate? I said, we're about to have our second kid. And he goes, oh, mate, commiserations. And it sounded horrible, but I'm like, this guy's got kids. He gets that I'm about to go through the fire. So I appreciate you talking openly about this, man. But I know you just said that it's not necessarily something that you're looking for strategies to navigate your way through. You just need that confidence or that comfort in the fact that it is hard. But how do you deal with it? I appreciate you being so open about the fact it's not the sunshine and rainbows.
I don't know if my wife would say that I do. My wife and I got a really awesome relationship. I think some things people need to know is that you need to know it's hard, because your relationship gets so strained.
Yes.
That you need to know that that's okay. And I sort of we always say to our friends when they say they read an article, we go, did you read the article or just the headline? And so I saw the headline and maybe the first couple lines. This one, and it was talking about how when you're stressed, when you're truly stressed, that you can only see the negative in your partner. And it's true. We definitely had that for a long time. And it was really, really hard. And I think there were times before we got married where we just started our relationship. We would have a fight and it could last for days, the tension. And we've got it down so it lasts for 20 minutes, an hour, worst case overnight, worst case. And a lot of that is just really presuming the best intention of the other person, trying to work out like, how do I find a way to have this resolved quickly and to be loving and realize it probably is my fault somehow. I just can't see it. But even though we're really strained sometimes, we're doing our best not to blame the other person, even though there's times when Brian wants to put my head through a window, and vice versa, where you just go, I oh, I love you, but why do I want to kill you? I just think it's really important for couples to know that kind of strain is part of the process, because you're just so tired. And the moment you think you get to rest, some baby screams, or they throw up all over you, or there's something else to do. It's the bin truck pulls up and you're like, you're kidding me. So part of it is just really knowing that you're going to be sad. I think that's really important. I haven't managed, they say get time for yourself and all that. I haven't managed to do that. If I get time for myself, that means that Bron's got 2 kids. So that doesn't seem like a win at all. Sleep's great, but you just don't really have that luxury of sleep, frankly.
Yeah, it's so true.
I did have a friend say to me once, we had quite a few miscarriages before we had kids, and it was tough, and it was really tough. And he said, Dobbo, it's okay to buy happiness. And I said, wow, yeah. Like, I think all my personal development was, I'm resilient and resourceful, and, I don't need a crutch of alcohol or shopping or whatever. But, Brian and I we didn't have kids then, so we had time, but we just went shopping, and we probably just blew $1,000 on just for the sake of it. And so I have realized that sometimes you just realize that you're doing this to cope, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's a pattern. I think there's a few things that I'm always doing for Brona, and I think for classic heterosexual relationship is important. Sometimes when you work all week, you get to the weekend and you think, I'll mow the lawn, or I'll, some people play golf, or they go, I'm going to get some extra work done to get on top of things. Then the weekend doesn't look any different for your partner, because now they've still got the kids. And that doesn't work. You have to allocate the weekend for the weekend. It has to be that, because otherwise your partner has no contrast and the whole ship sinks. I also think that if you say to your partner, you'll be home at 5, then you've got to be home at 5. You can't be 5:05. It really, really matters to your mentality for both parties. And the other thing is, I think you just got to resource things that are hard. So we had a little win. This is ridiculous, but it was such a cool win, and it continues to be. The kids just throw shit all over the floor when they're eating. Like, they launch it, and they're learning sensory stuff. So they want to, they're trying to, and they just drop it off the edge. And
Oh, dude. I wish my wife was listening to this right now, because our kid's doing the same thing. And I've never wanted to learn the triangle choker hold so bad, but I feel like you're about to give more helpful advice.
There's 2 tips. The first thing is the child needs to know what to do with it instead. And so we just put a second bowl there, and they just fill up the second bowl. It was amazing.
Instead of throwing it on the floor?
Yeah, they just want to do something with it. So we just go, oh yeah, put it over here. And the second bowl's, like, if they're in a high chair, the bowl could be on the table, or it could be still on the high chair somewhere else. But the idea that they're moving it and putting it somewhere is enough. So that was amazing. But the second thing, we just got a dustpan and brush that you use while you're standing up, a tall one for $12.99 from Kmart.
That's a good advice.
We were like, why did we not get this 2 years ago?
That's such good advice.
It's because getting it on the floor is such a pain in the ass. Just over it. And then if you leave it there too long, it just cakes up and it's solid and it's never coming off. So we are always trying to look at what resource do we need. And often I think that people think, we all go, oh no, I've got it covered. But it's really worth listening to other people think, well, what did you do? And noticing, what's the bane of your life? There's someone else got a solution here. So that's in a nutshell. There's probably some other things, but that's what comes to mind at first. But I am open about it. And when I said before that, that's the space I live in, I think it's really important people know I don't live in there. It's who I am, and I have lived there, but I haven't been at all. I've just been, and I don't feel like the positive guy. I feel like the guy that just vents and bitches about life at the moment. I don't feel positive or uplifting at all. But sometimes people like that, but I don't feel like it. And I've just been really concerned. Have I truly lost my joy or zest? And I haven't. Like, our kids slept through recently. They're just starting to sleep through again. And I'm like, I feel like a king. Like, oh my God, I've got 6 hours, a couple of nights in a row. I feel like a king.
Dude, we caught up with one of my wife's good friend the other day. She's got a 12-year-old girl and an 8, I think he's like 7 or 8. And I remember her saying, about 4 years ago or 5 years ago. She's like, "Oh, it's so nice that I'm starting to feel like myself again." And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean starting to feel like yourself again?" She's like, "Dude, the first 4 or 5 years of your kid's life," and I think it was very similar to what you and I are talking about now. Just that constant commitment that a kid requires in order to be alive. It can be so draining. She's like, I felt drained. I felt exhausted. I felt grumpy. I felt miserable. And to get them to an age where they're a little bit more, they still require attention, but they can go to the toilet by themselves. They can have a shower by themselves. They can get their breakfast organized. She goes, it's just a massive breath of fresh air. And even today, daycare day, as I mentioned, just for clarification, Jesse and I, we went down for a coffee at Ket Baker out here in Ocean Grove. And when we were sitting there, I said to her, I was like, I'm listening to a book at the moment where he's a Franciscan priest, and he's talking about just the different stages of a person's health development, and some signs that you might be in a little bit of a downer kind of a phase. He spoke about how you notice in the downer phase, a lot of the time your mind feels as though it's closed up, your heart feels as though it's closed up, and your skin feels a little bit more leather. And I've noticed, even in the way that I joke, like it's a bit more cynical and a bit more. Like Jessie said to me a while ago, she's like, "You've always been so agreeable. It's amazing to see the last couple of years you just like sort of call that bullshit where you see it." And I'm like, I'm sort of glad. Like I took it as a compliment. I'm glad that I'm a bit more like that. But also, I know that some of that is just a frustration, maybe with the period. Like just to echo what you've already said, I definitely feel the same way in so many respects. And the thing I'm trying to navigate, and it sounds like you've sort of thought about this a bit as well, is I'm so put off by that grumpy old man, like that stereotype of a grumpy old man who's just become cynical with life, that I think I have to cut myself some slack sometimes, because I'll sit back and I'm like, crap, am I just becoming that, or am I in a really intense part of life? And it's not always just one or the other for me. I think sometimes I've got to be cautious that I'm not just leaning on cynicism. But the
Yeah.
other side of it's true as well, which you acknowledge, which I appreciate, is the fact that we're just in an intense kind of a phase.
And with COVID too, we had a perfect storm. Our child was born right before the second lockdown or something. Mum and Dad got to see him right before we went into this full lockdown, and so we lost all our. We were in a fairly new area, so we didn't have a social network locally, and all the mothers groups that we could have been part of and similar all just got disbanded, and so you had no friends. And what I realized during all the lockdown periods is that what we missed the most is we didn't laugh. We stopped laughing. And so that's the fuel. So it's a particularly hard time, and I'm just worn out as a bloke. I keep getting asked to be things that I'm not. And like I'm asked to put things into Tupperware containers, and I hate that. And I'm asked to negotiate, although I don't negotiate. We don't negotiate with terrorists. So I do not negotiate with my daughter. But sometimes you're just begging her to get on the goddamn toilet, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm worn out, and I love the films. Daddy's Home, the Daddy's Home 1 and 2. If you haven't seen them, have you seen those?
Are they like from the 90s, maybe?
No,
I
no, no,
feel
no.
like I've heard the title, but
They're Will Ferrell, and the
oh
second
no.
one's a Christmas movie. They're absolute must see. But he talks about dads just like we just take shit. That's what we do. We just and you're like, yeah, you do. You keep you take a beating because you're constantly being asked to be something you're not. And it's not that you don't want to be that, but it's not in our nature. Like I can go out in the garden and I can work all day in the rain. I can pick up a dead rat if I had to. I can dig out the sewer if I had to, and I'm fine. And I say to Brona, come outside and do this with me. And she's like, she tries, but she's like got 7 minutes in her. All right. But then I go inside and I'm doing the home stuff and I just can't do it. So but I try. And so I'm constantly being asked to be something I'm not. And I had two really unique experiences when we had the kids. I remember driving across the Westgate Bridge, coming home one night, and I was just tired and narky. And I had this aha moment where I suddenly had no more time for any friends that were pretending to be my friend. Where, some people you text them, they text you right back. And there's other people you text them and it's like, oh, sorry, I never got back to you. How was the event? And you're like,
Oh yeah, I'm
it's
guilty. I'm
bullshit,
guilty.
right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I need to improve that. I'm glad you said that, because all my friends listening to this would be like, Tyson, you can't not acknowledge that you. So
It's
we
just
can, yeah.
it's a courtesy. If you just, and I think people just don't know how to give bad news, or they don't know what the answer is. So you got to solve that. And so anyway, I had this aha moment. I was like, I'm just not putting up anybody who's not my friend anymore. I was just too tired. I didn't have the energy. And then once I had the second child, I was driving, and I was like, you know what? Anybody that any client that gives me any hassle, any grief, that is any way at all just not worth the effort, they're gone. Just was like it switched in me, and as a result, my income went through the roof because I also stopped doing things that that were low value. And I think that a lot of parents know that feeling where I just don't have time, so I have to get it done right now. And when you're young, you've got so much time that sometimes you don't get it done at all. But these were the result of fatigue. But then through COVID and other things like, you know, all the wars overseas and similar, and I think there's some serious trouble coming globally. But you do understand how things work, and you start to see, oh, that's why my granddad was like that, because he'd seen life change so much, and he'd become tired and miserable and saw us going in an unhealthy direction. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. So it was interesting when I listened to Bert the other day and just hearing his gratitude for things. A lot of it really is what you're focusing on. It's what's captured your imagination. And when you're tired, you don't have the resilience to keep an idea out. So they're just things I'm navigating. Don't think I'm doing a very good job. I'm still married, and I've still got 2 kids that like me. So I might be doing okay. But I just think it's important that we don't romanticize it. Like I got this book when Holly was born. It was about being a father, and all these famous people talking, you know, about being what a father means and all this kind of shit. And it was great. And I'm a little way in, and I'm like, I'm not writing that book. I'm writing that I want to take a shit on my own. Like, that's what I'm writing about.
Seriously.
And
And I'll write the forward to it. I'll write the forward.
Too, right?
I agree with everything that Tommy just said.
I just want to put a shirt on and be confident that that's the shirt I'll leave the house in. You know, like cry. I just want to wake up in the morning and know that the kids have stayed in the nappy and they don't have to change the entire. I just want that.
Just want to eat avocado off my finger and know it's avocado.
Yeah. I just want to sit at dinner and have a meal with my daughter without her laying all over me and putting her feet on me. And I just want to not get hit in the balls every 2 days.
Seriously.
I cannot believe how many times I get hit in the balls. I'm like, I'm so tired of it.
Oh, dude, I'll give you a worse one. We were sitting in our lounge room a couple of weeks ago, and my little boy's gone through a phase where he's like every day he's a dog. Like he'll spend 10 minutes on the floor going around, "Hey, Dad, I'm a dog." Okay, cool, buddy. Like, so I was laying down there. He barks, he bites, he does everything. I was in my tracky pants. It was 7 o'clock at night. I was free balling. My little boy came up to me, and all of a sudden, wife's on the couch. He's on the floor. I'm on the floor. He comes up and he bites me right on my old fella. And goes like without meaning to, like through the pants, just trying to be a dog. And I go, oh no, Charlie just bit me on the dick. And Charlie, who doesn't know that many words yet, he comes out with I bit you on the dick. He did that, and then Jessie goes, babe, you can't do that. And she whacked me. And then so I went into the toilet, Dobbo, then this part, I'm sorry to all the listeners eating dinner. I went into the toilet just to make sure I was okay. The little man, he'd drawn blood. So when people say, I just want to be able to relax on the toilet, I go, how about this one for size? I just want to not get bit on the dick just once, just once for a couple of weeks. It's just things going on that I just never anticipated. Who knew you were going to get bit on the dick just being a dad? I'm just trying to raise you, mate. Leave me alone.
Yeah, and then it shits me when another bird gag. Oh, but it's so great, really, isn't it? I'm like, no, it's fucking not. And so, like, I love them. I love them with all my heart, and those kids know it, and I tell them. But it reminds me of that story I grew up with as the magic faraway. The magic is it the magic giving tree? You know, the giving tree. I think it's just called the giving tree.
I don't know it.
But it's a kid's book where there's a little boy sits under the tree and he gets apples from the tree, and then eventually he says, "Oh, I need, I don't know, compost or something." He takes the leaves and then eventually he's like, "Oh, I need to build a house," you know. And the tree says, "I'll take my branches," and then he goes, "Oh, I need to build something else. I'll take my stump or take my trunk," and then eventually he's like, "There's just a stump left." He's an old man. He goes, "Oh, I need," he goes, "Oh." The tree says, "I've got nothing left to give." He says, "I'm just a stump." And he said, "But you can sit if you want." And this old man sits on the tree. And I'm like, yeah, that's the parent. The parent is constantly surrendering another part of themselves to allow the next. And it's interesting because I was saying to you just before, like my mum she's in a real bad way. And it's an interesting turning the cycles of life where, look, I don't have a lot of confidence where mum's at. We could just completely turn around. but at the moment it's not looking great. But mum and I have said goodbye to each other in a very, and I think it takes a lot of courage to have that conversation as candidly as we did, and there's a lot of love there. But also I can see now as a parent how much she loves me, and I didn't know that. And now I do. And so I'm much more affectionate towards my mum. I let my mum hug me. I let my mum kiss me because I know that's what I would want to do with my kids. And so it's an interesting awareness that of just, because I do love the kids and I'm prepared to do all this stuff that's difficult. But it's interesting also then seeing, this is the flaws that I thought I saw in my parents, things you might want from them as a parent. You could have been more like this. You could have been more like that. Now I'm like, no. Good on you. I totally get whatever you did. It's not like you didn't try. That 100% they put it all in that they could. And I think that's that. Yeah, I remember that giving tree. They always used to read at school, and I thought it was a shit story. I'm like, I get it now.
Oh, yeah, it's a story of my life, man. It's amazing. My dad used to always say to me as a kid, he's like, you never realize how much your parent loves you until you have a kid of your own. And I was like, okay, Dad, cool, Dad, let's just go. I just want to go play footy. Like, okay. And now my little man's here. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't quite realize that was it is.
Yeah.
It's just it's an insane experience. Yeah, but both are true, aren't they? It's like, yeah, there's so much love, and as we've established, it's like you also get bit on the dick from time to time. It's just it's a strange correlation.
On that one, this is it's better. It's more of a visual thing, but I was in the shower with the kids the other day, and Holly does this thing where straight away she'll just get a cup and put it below my willy as a tap because the water runs off it, and I'm mortified. I feel so uncomfortable, and I'm like, oh. So I sort of turn away, and it's so bad. And then the other day, I must have just been washing. We just soap up your arms. I must have just brushed my willy, and it just swung like a pendulum, a bit. And she looked at it all puzzled like. And then she just whacked it to see it move again, back and forth.
It's just
I am mortified. I'm dying inside. And then she just goes on and does whatever she's doing in the shower. She's moved on. I felt like I was so embarrassed.
Yeah, it's so true. And then I start getting nervous. Like, okay, well, at what age does this start to entrench itself as a memory? Like, is my boy going to get to 5 and go, wait, what?
Yeah.
What's this? Look at the strangest memory.
It's so weird.
Oh, dude, that's great, Dobbo. But you say that, and the funny thing is as well, it's like it's that innocence, really. Like a lady, I took my little man to the pool yesterday, and I was standing in the deep end, and Charlie, he's at that stage now where he can just jump in, and he's sort of just learning how to quickly swim to you. And a lady goes to me, it's like it's just it's an incredible amount of trust they have. And I was like, oh yeah, it is insane because there's very few people that if I couldn't swim, I don't know one person who would jump in the pool with to save me. My body weight's too much for my wife to be able to look after me. It is a strange experience, and it's just that innocence, like whether they're whacking you on the willy or jumping into a pool. It's like you just don't. Like you've got so much trust that whatever you do is fine. I'm going to look after you. I'm still going to be your mate at the end of it. It's a very strange but beautiful experience.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and I definitely now can appreciate that. When I'm talking to an audience, I'm always aware that we're talking about work, but the chances are they're juggling a lot privately. And I actually presume that if they've got the young kids, they've got no time. I generally presume that everybody in the audience has got bad debt. They may not, but I just sort of take that position. And I also take that position that their relationship, their romantic relationship is probably under strain. Because most people do just such little work on how do we have a better relationship. They just do token stuff at best. And I start from there when I'm speaking. It's not that I even talk about those issues, but sometimes I'll flag little examples. But I start there to try to understand the audience, like back we were talking before. And now, I'm a parent, I can understand the audience a bit differently. And I couldn't before. We had kids later in life. So for a long time there, I wouldn't have understood that aspect of the audience at all, not even remotely.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. Dobby, you said something. I was interested in hearing about before, and at the risk of because you followed it up with how important your focus is on the way you feel throughout your day. But you said you were curious about the global situation at the moment, not necessarily super optimistic. Like, what makes you say that?
I've been saying to my business club for a long time. So I've got this people who run, I guess, small businesses of anywhere between 700K to probably $2 to $3 million revenue. And we meet every couple of months and I coach them and they just pay a nominal fee and I've coached them for years and years, and other people can join, like you can listen to my podcast and you can learn a bit about it. But I've been saying to this group for a long time, this doesn't stack up. And what I've been meaning is that you can't just keep spending like this. It felt like we were just infinitely spending. Everybody's getting new cars and new houses and investment properties, and they're having iPads and $1,000 watches that connect to their phone. And I need a new phone every year. And I kept on my sister has always said that I'm very good at predicting the future. And I look back and I go, yeah, I have. I've always kind of been able to extrapolate with what we're doing here. What does this add up to? And I've always thought it. And then I went and read Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order. And if those people don't know him, he founded the world's biggest private hedge fund. And he's pretty much on the spectrum. He just creates a formula for everything. And instead of just researching economics from the last 100 years, he went back and researched the last 600 years and said, well, what are the patterns to financial cycles? And he could see that every 75 to 100 years there was a global conflict, and it was kind of predictable. There was a pattern to it. And this really helped me be able to articulate what I've been thinking for a long time, but didn't have the knowledge or the words, didn't have the data. So yeah, I think things I don't know what's going to happen, but I think the conflict's just going to get worse and worse. I think that leaders have just forgotten how bad war is, and I don't think they give a shit because they're interested in themselves. I think we've been very trusting, and these people just keep taking advantage of our trust and come higher and higher up the chain until they're in charge for a long time, and they change things around so they can stay in charge. And I think that there's not much that we can do except to know what our values are so that we can live by them if things got worse. And I think that you want to live inside your means. You want to not have any bad debt. And I think when COVID hit, our finances are in order. We're by no means rich, but we don't have any bad debt. So we could take a hit. We didn't need to. If we lost our income, we were okay. And so that's the sort of thing that we try to move towards. And I try to encourage all my businesses that I lead to be taking during this time to not being too ambitious with some of their strategic objectives, but to be sure-footed. You can still be aggressive, but as long as it's not putting everything at risk. And also during listening back to a couple of your podcasts and understanding where you stand on on some of the political things that's happening.
I'm a loudmouth. I'm a loudmouth at the moment.
It's great. But we found that we had views that people didn't like, but really we didn't. They invented our views. They had no fucking idea what we thought. They just marginalized us. And to this day, I really have not said much about it, but people just invent it. But we lost really close friends over it. Really. And I'm stoked because it cleaned it out. I'm like, well, that's good to know because I won't invest there. Like, I don't know if I've forgiven them yet necessarily, but I'm just not going to invest there. And so I think that you're trying to work out who's truly in your team if things get strained. And hopefully I'm so wrong. I'd love to be wrong. Wouldn't that be great? Because I don't want to raise kids in a world of conflict. But it's an incredible read. It's an incredible book.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting hearing you talk about just watching that that friendship group diminish a little bit. I had the same thing. What's interesting to me is one of my closest friends said to me a little while ago, he goes, mate, I disagree with half the shit you say, but I'm happy to talk to you about any of it. And I love those conversations. They're the kind of people, we can see things completely differently. In fact, a lot of me and my best mates do. But what I love about my best mates is the fact you can sit down and I go, hey, look, this is where I'm at. And they know I'm not just trying to be a prick or trying to be difficult or, trying to just go away from the norm. And just being able to chat through those ideas and have that conversation. But the flip side of that's also true. I was amazed just watching as I said, I was a bit of a loudmouth. And I think I was so frustrated the last couple of years and felt like there was nothing that I could do. Like there was, as you say, people would pigeonhole you and just assume they knew where you stood on a certain issue. Based on one idea that he's obviously conservative based on the fact he thinks this. You're like, well, maybe on that issue I am, but what made me laugh was I after a while I was like, no, get stuffed. Everyone else is allowed to tell me their opinion. I'm just going to start chucking out a few of my opinions, though I know they're
Yeah.
not the mainstream, though I know people are going to be upset with me. And just watching my Instagram following just go like this,
Yeah.
like it was actually I would put up something sometimes and have a little laugh with Jessie. I go, babe, like, give me a number. How many do I lose off this one?
Yeah.
She's like 13. I was like, oh, 22. And I was like, all right, you win that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
But
you're
you're
right.
very brave though. When I listen back to some of your stuff, you're really brave, and I commend you for that, doing that, because because there is risk in that, and it was a very unstable time. And what we discovered was who could handle difference and who could think in fear. And there was a lot of people I discovered couldn't do difference, and they were in fear. They just went to the fetal position, and there's no courage, and the complete lack of any kind of critical thinking. But the big one is just difference. Like, I've got my friend Monique. She's a Muslim woman, and up until just recently, she's been wanting her jab since she was 21 or so, and she's just taken it off, actually, which is an interesting conversation for another day. But she said, when do I go to a conference and I've got to look for a seat, I might see someone with dreadlocks, and I'll sit next to them because I know they can do difference. And she said, I went to a conference for a very famous psychologist in the country, and as soon as I went in, there was hundreds and hundreds of people. I sat in the front row, just near the doors, and everybody, the rest of the whole place filled, and there were seats all around me. And like she's like, people can't do difference, and that's what definitely I found, difference, and can't think with fear. It's quite extraordinary, actually, but it feels like it's been a good clear out. But yeah, I don't think the future is. Well, he says, Ray Dalio suggests that there's 15 years of conflict and very difficult times, and there is a small percentage of the population that have the hell of a time, the most painful of times. And Ukraine would be going through that right now, but that's not necessarily the conflict, but that would be an example. And then after 15 years, there's this long, this long period of stability, and usually prosper, where the new rules of how the world order works, and everybody gets it, and you just get on with it, and there don't need to be conflict. Now, we may not all like the rules. Who knows what's going to happen? But the West has definitely been in control for a long time and had the largest influence. And there's people been on the receiving end of that didn't like it. So it just changes. And the difficult thing, like as you say, about getting older and you're tired and you read about it and you're like, that doesn't look bright. But I definitely am trying to work out how to have a view that can still allow my children to have an optimistic view. That's not delusional, but is enjoyable. Because how are you going to enjoy life if you're constantly thinking about it?
Yeah,
and we don't have any problems today, so that's okay.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. It is true. It's funny, man, isn't it? It's like, and so many of the predictions that I make, I'm not saying anything that you said is going to be wrong or right. I'm just saying that so many of the predictions that I make, the fearful ones, don't work out. Like, don't necessarily eventuate. So I got to try and just pull myself back into that that attitude of like, all right, we're okay here and now. All right, what's the next step? But easier said than done.
There is a model too that says, okay, there's some people that are, say, alarmists or whatever the word is, and they're hoarders and they go and build shelters and stuff. The general logic. So what I do with my work is I collect strategies. I look for the smartest possible approach. Like, if I'm buying a car, I'm like, what's the best decision making for buying a car? If I'm everything, like when I'm trying to work out how to make someone run faster or swim faster, trying to look for the most elegant strategy. In this situation, it is about knowing your values. Truly, what do we value, and can we live by those under duress? It's about having your money in order so that you don't have any unnecessary debt. And the other one is that if there was something that, if you want to prepare for a negative future, if there was something that you're going to do now anyway that also would serve that, then you would do that. But you don't have to worry about the other ones. So if you thought you wanted a car, you wanted to buy an old car because you always wanted an old car, and it just so happens that also if there's a sun flare or something, the microchip's not going to blow up and therefore it'll still work, and that was something you're always interested in, then you should do that. And I'm comfortable with that. Now, I haven't really thought I haven't got many answers to that except have an extra gas bottle, so if I'm having a barbecue, it doesn't run out. But I think that's a really good model where my wife and I would talk through, things are going to get rough. What do we think? And we're like, well, let's just put that money in that account. And, like, I going to give anybody more advice than that. But yeah, that's been a good model for me to try to work out, well, which decision should I make?
Yeah,
And it's the one that's useful either way, whether or not there's good or bad outcomes.
Dobbo, I'm glad to catch up with you again. I'm gonna let you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'm glad we took that in the direction that we did. As I said, I didn't necessarily come with a plan of what I wanted to talk to you about, because we've had enough conversations now for me to go, okay, I'm very interested in this guy. I know you can have a good conversation. So I'm glad we just let the ball went where it go. That wasn't even an expression. I'm glad we let it just sort of flow. But man, it was good to hear your thoughts on the parenting stuff as well. That was really helpful. I'm glad you opened up about it, because I thought I was just a prick who wasn't handling the role well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why I do it. Like I'm actually really private, but there are some things I think I just got to talk about it, because I want to help, and I hope it is uplifting. And to finish on the war stuff in the future, is like, I hope there's not to be deflating, but yeah, I just think it's okay. Like, I've got a friend that he says, "Oh God, I love my kids, but geez, I come home from work and then I've got to go from working to playing blocks, and that's real hard." And I think we just need to acknowledge it's hard. And as soon as we've said it's hard, then it's sort of out of the system and you can get on with it. I think if we have to pretend or feel bad about it, that that's, we're kind of doubling up our pain. It's already difficult, and then we're thinking we shouldn't have these feelings. And the reality is, I'm 49. Blocks don't interest me, so that's okay.
You're 49, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
You're good at 49, man. Suits you.
Thanks, mate. It's just in the back of my
Awesome.
head. Every time I see a photo of myself, I'm like, shit, I look like my kid's granddad.
Oh, dude, don't stress.
Right.
Don't stress. That's why I thought when we first started this conversation, you mentioned the zoom in, you could see the wrinkles. I just assumed you were talking about me, because the amount the amount of Botox clinics I see, I go, I get it. I'm curious.
Yeah. My wife went to a day care center the other day, and she said, "Oh, I'm thinking about getting to them. I think I'm getting Botox." And I would tell my wife, "You're not getting Botox. It's just ridiculous." And the woman said, No, you don't want Botox because it does A, B, and C, but you just want to use this cream." And it's like $80. Fantastic. But she came home and she goes, "It feels really good. I think if I'm not going to spend money on Botox, I'm using this cream." So I'm like, okay, we've got to win. And I haven't told her yet, but I'm going to start nicking that cream.
Well, if you could just send me the name, that would be greatly
Oh,
appreciated.
yep. And they'll be sponsoring the show next week, folks. Mate, and
Awesome.
good job on the show, mate. I had to listen to a couple of episodes and I really enjoyed it. So you're on a winner here. Actually, you know
Awesome.
what your topic is? I realized I read your fine print on, what the show's about, and it said things you do. I had the exact language for this. It's observations of life, or commentary on life, both funny and deep.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what this show's about. It's observations or commentary on life, both funny and deep. And if you could switch the word life for like living large or something else, but that's it. It's deep and funny. That's unique. Well done.
Yeah. Thanks, Dobbo. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on. All right. I'll leave you to it. See you later, everybody.